Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the creepiest, most unsettling encounter you've ever had with a stranger? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My first time in Mexico City, I didn't realize what a bad neighborhood my hotel was in. I had just stepped out of the hotel, and 3 men noticed me and started walking right over to me really fast and surrounded me on 3 sides. I literally jumped into what turned out to be a tiny bookstore because I sensed I wasn't about to be grabbed. The only people working in there were 2 young girls, maybe 8 and 9. One of the guys followed me in and stayed right next to me, blocking my exit. And then, as if by magic, a door I hadn't even noticed in the back of the store opened and an adult male, probably the girl's dad, emerged. The man left the store, and after lingering a few more minutes and buying some books out of gratitude for him, probably saving my life, I went back to the hotel. I stopped at a Love's off of Interstate I really late one night to get gas. At the time I was 17 and heading home from work. The gas station was pretty much empty, no other cars at the pump or anything. I went in, paid for my gas, and came back out to start pumping it. I noticed a guy standing behind one of the pumps on the other side looking at me, and it gave me the creeps. So I decided I'd just get back in my vehicle while the pump was going with the doors locked. Once I was in my truck, he came jogging over, motioning for all to roll my window down, and I just shook my head no. He tried to yank open my door, and then started banging on the windows. I called the store, and one of the employees came out and told the guy the cops were on the way. The guy took off running, and the employee told me to stay in my truck, and he just pulled the pump out for me and told me to be safe on my way. I no longer stop at gas stations at night if it can be helped at all. And if I do, I pick a busy one that's well lit. It still gives me the creeps, and I fully believe the guy either wanted to harm me, steal my truck, or both. Leaving the hospital late at night in a sketchy area. Approaching my car, some dude appeared out of nowhere, walking toward me and calling out. I stopped and said, "What's up?" The guy had ripped pants on and nothing else. Very dirty with longer hair sticking out at all angles with bulging eyes. He asked, "Is it a good idea to give out your bank PIN number?" I replied, "Yeah, give me yours." He looked alarmed and said loudly, "No!" Then suddenly took off at full sprint. As he ran, I could hear him huffing and slobbering, trying to go like the Flash. Walking home late one night in a large town. Not a soul was out, no cars either. I heard feet running up from directly behind me, quickly and quietly. My instincts took over, and I turned around and talked to the guy as if I knew him. I giggled and told him he scared the shit out of me. I think I caught him off guard because he stopped running and looked confused. He started chatting with me, obviously was on drugs, and told me he was a carny in town for the fair. He bummed a cigarette off of me and left. Pretty sure he had something unpleasant planned for me, but surprised him with my lack of fear. I used to hitchhike on occasion around our city when I was a teenager. Mostly things went okay, but the last time I caught a ride, I hardly even looked at the guy driving and just got in, thinking about what I was going to do when I got home. I told him to drive straight down the street for half a mile, but then he made a turn that took us away from the street I lived on. He was going into an industrial area, and I realized this was not good. It occurred to me to find somebody on the street, anybody, and wave to them. They would see me in the truck with this guy, and it could come back to haunt him if he did anything bad. So I saw a teenager who was probably just a year or 2 older than me, and I waved and smiled and waved some more. I laughed and said, "Oh no, that was my brother. Now he's going to be asking me who I was with in the truck." The guy's demeanor changed immediately. He looked deflated. All his original cockiness was gone. I told him to go down a few more blocks and drop me off. So nothing happened, except that I never ever hitchhiked again. It wasn't until much later that I realized how very lucky I had been to get away when I did. Thankfully, I never saw him again. Yeah, you got lucky indeed. Hitchhiking, I don't need me to say it. You're very self-aware, so I don't know, maybe it was safe a long time ago or in small working communities, but not anymore, man. Crazy. As a teen, I worked a part-time job after school. If I left work exactly at 11 p.m., I could make the last bus of the night at 11:04. That made my commute a bit easier. If I got out a bit late and missed that bus, I'd have to walk about a mile down this creepy street that was one half residential with big houses tucked back about 200 feet behind trees, and the other side of the street, a large old church. There was a median strip in the road. I normally would walk on the church side, and at night all the statues looked creepy. I always had a thought of some random killer hopping out from behind the bushes. One night, I was walking and got this eerie feeling to walk down the median strip, but ignored it because I figured I'd look like a creep or suspicious. I walked down the church side, glance over at the creepy statues, and kind of laugh like I'm tripping and continue walking. Like 5 seconds later, a balding, chubby guy in a wife beater and shorts jumped out from the bushes, sweating profusely, looked at me, then stared at the ground and started huffing, puffing, and chuckling. I ran, and he just stayed there when I looked back. I'm guessing he eventually moved somewhere else, but I was legit terrified. He had his arms down to his side, hands balled in a fist, and was shrugging his shoulders with every huff and puff. I never let my job keep me late again. After that, I was against the law to be in the first place. Was stalked by 3 strangers while walking home off a base in southern Turkey. One in front, one behind, and another the next street over. As their distance closed and started to box me in, I stopped, made long eye contact with each, and slowly reached into my uniform jacket and held my hand there, pretending to have a gun. Luckily it worked, and they all turned and ran. I was driving through a really rough part of Brooklyn after a late shift at a gig probably 20 years ago. There was a guy passed out face down in the middle of the road. It wasn't a side street, and if it was daytime, it would have been really busy with cars. I drove past, but my conscience got the better of me, and I backed up and manually rolled down my window to yell, "Hey buddy, you okay?" I had hardly gotten the second sentence out of my mouth when the dude sprang up and charged at my car. I have never thrown a car into gear and driven away faster in my life. He ran after me at Usain Bolt speed for a half a mile until I lost him. It was terrifying. Not the most terrifying or inexplicable, but one that still haunts me. I was 15 on a trip to see my dad in Europe. In a train station in France, I smelled something pretty terrible. I looked around and saw a man who was incontinently drunk, sitting in a pool of his own waste, both kinds, holding a bottle. He looked utterly defeated and miserable. He saw me looking at him, and he looked back at me. That look has haunted me for 40 years. At my old job, there was a 6 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. shift, which I hated being scheduled for because I didn't have a car and all the bus routes I usually didn't turn or run at 2:30 a.m. There was a random commuter, but at 3 a.m. that I would take on those shift nights. It would drop me off at about a 15-minute walk from my house, most of which was across a big mall parking lot, and then the last little bit of street, which was always very dark at that time. One night, I got off the bus as usual, and while waiting to cross the street to get to the parking lot, a car slowly drove past me, and the driver was just sitting, staring straight at me. I continued on, and shortly after I realized He had pulled into the parking lot and was following me slowly with his car. It was the middle of the night. There was no one around and nowhere to know how long they would take, or if this guy would do something if he saw me with my phone. When I was younger, when I got near my street, I acted like I was walking past it because there was no way to drive directly on it from that part of the parking lot. And when I was almost there, I quickly darted across the road to my street and concluded and could see the guy in the car quickly try to find an exit so he could continue following me. I hid in my neighborhood bushes before he could get there and watched him drive up and down a few times, booking and looking for me. Eventually, he gave up and I quickly ran the rest of the way home. After that night, I'd just Uber home when I worked that shift. It was way more expensive, but I'd rather spend money than experience whatever that creep was planning on doing to me. I run in the woods on a trail regularly. One day I came across a huge suitcase lightly hidden in tall grass. When I got closer to it, a guy kind of jumped out of the woods and got between me and the suitcase. But he was not touching or picking up the suitcase. It was immediately creepy. He was wearing boots, but said he had been trying to run 50 kilometers. I was already moving fast away from him. As soon as he jumped out, I'd clocked the boots. The next 2 days I ran into cops on the trails that were looking for the body of a missing person. I had to show them where the suitcase had been. Last year I drove to the store 2 minutes down the street to grab something for my mom. I had my younger sibling with me. I'm pulling in, stop at the sign, look multiple times. My lights are on, nobody was there. I go with a last look, and all of a sudden, this silver car comes flying out of nowhere and nearly hits me. We both slammed the brakes, and I think one of us honked. Cars did not touch. I pull across the parking lot and park because I didn't want to be close to drivers like that. He pulls after me. He's pissed, starts gesturing like he wants me to roll down the window or open the door, and he starts to get out. I'm female, and it's completely dark out. He's physically much bigger than I am. I freak out and take off out of the lot. He then proceeds to follow me across the city for 10 to 15 minutes straight. I get stuck at a red light. He pulls into the turn lane, boxes me in against the other cars, and got out of his vehicle and approached my window aggressively. I was screaming and crying. I was able to skirt around the car in front of me with barely an inch to spare, and he got right back behind me. He did this a second time. When I'd watch him in my rear view, he'd have the calmest expression, even leisurely look to the side as if it was just a normal thing to do. I had 911 on the phone and was heading to the nearest station. I ran 2 red lights with cameras and care. He waited for the light of day and still would find me every single time. I had my lights off, no turn signals, stay away from home, everything I was told to do in that type of situation, and he still found me every single time. I got lost and my GPS malfunctioned and sent me away from the station. By some grace of God, I passed the cop, screamed bloody murder, and caught his attention. The officers were very understanding and made it sure that I got home safe. Unfortunately, the guy didn't technically tailgate or do anything explicitly illegal, and I couldn't even make out the type of car. I just know he likely lives closer to me, because it's just a stranded grocery store nobody would be traveling far to. At 12 years old, I was stalked by a grown man while living at Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa in the 80s. He would call me from off base and couldn't be tracked by the MPs. He would say frightening things to me. My parents would disconnect the phone, but I always wonder why we couldn't get a new number. I think about this whenever this memory comes up. I thought he knew where I lived because he would say things that made me think he was watching me. He was also doing this to 2 other girls my age. Back then, we were around there, and that's how we got our info. I can't quite recall how it wrapped up, but I believe he was eventually caught. It was a great, long time ago, but a terrifying year of my life. I went camping with a few friends at the national seashore where there was nobody around for miles. I had an old Coleman stove and a dome tent that was all mesh on the top, and you used the rain fly for coverage or privacy. We had decided to leave it off due to it being a nice night and the wind catching us so much coming from the ocean. In the morning, I was looking around at all the animal tracks like crabs, etc., when I came across 2 large men's footprints in the sand right next to the tent on the way back from the dunes, like an inch or 2 away. He must have been standing almost touching the tent, looking down at us through the top while we slept. We had no idea. Still creeps me out. I was 15. My mate who lived on the high street was having a house party. I decided I'd go get a Subway to soak up some of the alcohol. Fortunately, it was only across the road. I went in and ordered my food. Whilst I was watching the guy make my sub, 2 blokes in their late 20s come in. I was short and quiet lad, so didn't make eye contact or say anything. But suddenly I heard, "What the f*** are you looking at?" I turned around to see one of the lads staring right at me. "Me?" I asked. To which he replied, "Yeah, you little prick. Don't you look at me. I'll smash your face into the glass, you little..." I looked at the member of staff, hoping he'd help in some way, and asked him to leave. He didn't. He stayed silent. Then the guy leant in close to my ear and said, "If you are not out of here in 30 seconds, I'm gonna f*** you up." By this time, my sandwich was ready, and I quickly paid and left. At the time, I was terrified. Looking back, the guy was just a drunk idiot. It's just the randomness of it that spooked me. I didn't do or say anything to him. It was the late 1980s and I was about 9 or 10 years old. My parents and I were eating dinner and we got a phone call, which I answered. It was some guy who started to ask me questions. "How old are you? What are you doing?" etc. About a minute, my parents asked who it was, and I said I didn't know. My dad grabbed the phone and the guy had hung up. I could still remember the sound of a ceiling fan in the background, low and slow. I was terrified and slept in my parents' room for a few nights. Around the same time, a gray man, a guy, was walking around our neighborhood and went to the house kitty-cornered from ours. He knocked on their door and asked the woman who answered, a mom of 4 kids, who lived there, while pointing at our house. And she told them how old I was, that I was an only child. My mom found out about it and raised hell. I know there was a lot of hand-wringing over stranger danger at the time, but there was some really scary stuff going on.